Hi everyone, today we are going to be placing some PDO lifting threads, really focusing on this patient's jawline and her neck. So starting off, I'm just making sure the patient is extremely clean. The patient went ahead and cleansed their face prior to treatment, and now I'm going in with HIPAA cleanse, and I will alcohol prior to as well. I'm also ensuring her hair is as covered as possible. Just in case my cannula is kind of gliding past her ear, I want to make sure that area is covered as well. So once she's clean, I'm going in with a marking pen and just mapping out where I want to treat. So in her face, we're doing a jowl thread as well as a jawline. I do believe I ended up going back in and adding another jawline once the patient sat up mid-treatment, but this is our estimated treatment plan. I always mark the patient when they're sitting up so I can appreciate gravity. And now I'm going in and numbing just with a little lidocaine with epi just to help control bleeding. This is an 18 gauge pilot needle, so just going in and making my insertion point. When you're in the correct plane, this treatment is relatively comfortable. I know it looks a little bit intense, but it's actually surprisingly more comfortable than you would think. Sometimes going through ligaments can be a little bit more painful than other locations, but in general, this is relatively comfortable. But in my syringe, I have a 3cc syringe with a 75 millimeter cannula. I'm placing lidocaine, so this is just plain 1% lidocaine, and I'm just doing a splash. As you can see, she was very comfortable as I was coming down that track. Now I'm going in with my thread. This is 19 gauge. We used kind of a combination of 19 and 18, but this is a 19 gauge cannula. So again, going back to the comfortability, she has had threads before, and you can tell by her face, she is relatively comfortable. And if she's having any discomfort, I always, am talking to my patients and letting them know to let me know if anything is more uncomfortable than others. But kind of the goal is to not have too much liquid in that vector. So I'm always just being mindful of the amount of lidocaine that I'm placing. Now I'm going in with an 18 gauge fixed thread. This is going to help fix that thread in place. So just give that thread something to hold on to. As you can see, she has a little bit of a pucker there, so I'm just kind of smoothing that out prior to going in. I was just having a little bit of difficulty. So now going in with my fix, and I am placing that thread right on top of my 19. Again, this is to help fix that thread in place and give it some grip, something to hold on to, and it's going to help maintain that lift. I'm using my left hand as my smart hand just to glide that cannula down and to ensure that I am in the correct plane, all the way from insertion point all the way down to my end point in the distal part of that jowl. I have a 3cc syringe on the end of my thread, so it gives me the ability to navigate back and forth a little bit in case I need to. And as you can see, again, I'm using my left hand as my smart hand and then going ahead and removing. I'm just using sterile tweezers to cut any remaining thread, and I'm placing a Band-Aid. I have my patient leave these Band-Aids on just for the remainder of the day. Especially with females, I'm really just worried about hair being over top of that insertion. Once they're at home and do their skincare and things at night, I'm not worried about it, so I just have them keep that Band-Aid on for the remainder of the day. Now we're going in and treating the neck. As you can see, the lidocaine is the most uncomfortable part. You can see that that was causing her a little bit of discomfort. But now I'm going in with my 18 gauge needle, and as long as I'm, again, in that correct plane, it's relatively comfortable. So just making my opening, making sure that I'm going to have the ability to get my cannula in. This is definitely a little bit more of an advanced technique, and if you at all struggle with depth when placing your threads, I do not recommend starting over the SCM behind the end of the mandible, just because it is a little bit difficult to navigate over the bone. So if you do have difficulty, Practice makes perfect, so just make sure you're very comfortable with finding your depth and being able to correct your depth prior to trying this technique. But as you can see, again, I'm using my left hand as my smart hand. I'm palpating and kind of using that hand to glide the tissue over top of my cannula instead of putting a lot of pressure and aggressively pushing that cannula through. I'm in the neck, so I just want to make sure I'm being as gentle as possible. But now I'm going down underneath, kind of more into the neck region. As you can see, I have multiple vectors there, so I'm just kind of forming a little bit of a space so I'm able to place my threads. And just a little tap, putting that numbing in. Like I said, I'm just doing a splash or so. Again, the patient is comfortable. Going in with an 18 gauge, I'm starting with the jawline. I always like to lift top to bottom. And again, if you kind of struggle with depth, just be very careful as you're going over the mandible. Like I said, it's a little bit more of a difficult technique, but my starting point for this treatment was over the SCM. So I was palpating that muscle, and you can see as she's kind of moving her head how her muscle is popping out and activating. So that was my starting point of anatomy. I know that I'm safest starting on top. You should never be starting behind. So that pilot hole is placed right over top of that muscle, and I'm using that same pilot hole for all three of my vectors here. One on top of the jawline, one right underneath, and one down into the neck. I am going to be placing a fixed thread as well, so she will have 4 threads, but 3 lifting, 1 fix. Again, that fix is to help have those threads have something to hold on to and help maintain that lift. My goal is to get as close to the medial part of the neck as possible, like right into that little pucker of tissue. I'm relatively close. I kind of ran out a little bit of room there, but I am as close as I can get. I use that entire length of my cannula. I'm starting over the SCM, so it does limit me a little bit as far as length. But this patient is still going to get a beautiful result because we're going to be coming in from the other side and lifting from the opposite direction, which we'll see in a minute. But she's going to get a bilateral pull and get a very beautiful result. So now I'm coming right underneath the jawline, again palpating, using my left hand as my smart hand and just kind of grabbing that tissue and gently placing it on top of my cannula. Again, when we're in the neck, you just want to make sure that you are very, very gentle and we're not pushing or prodding, and don't, be pushing past if you're meeting too much resistance. So just gentle pressure. I'm kind of using curtain over curtain rod technique with a mixture of just gliding that tissue on top. You can see I'm just eyeballing where my end point will be and just gently helping that cannula along. As far as aftercare, again, I have the patient leave the Band-Aids on until the end of the day. Then my biggest point of education is about infection prevention. So changing their pillowcase when they get home, no makeup for 24 to 48 hours, no working out, sweating, so saunas, tanning beds, no facials, anything of that sort where we're risking infection. Infection in a lifting thread is probably one of the worst complications that you can have because the only solution is removal of that thread, which is quite difficult. But just ensure the patient has good education on aftercare. I have never had an infection in the past 4 or 5 years that I've been using PDO lifting threads. So just make sure that that patient is very educated on keeping this area clean. Just snipping the remaining threads. I'm just going to put some gentle pressure. I don't want to pop out all of these little pulls because that's going to minimize my lift. It's going to naturally, as the patient moves, soften out.